Today, we are going to learn about nouns. Everybody say nouns. Nouns are for people, places, or things. Please write that down in your notebook. Person. Write that down. Person, place, or thing. Person. Peter. Person, place, or thing. Take off the hat.
When's the last time you thought someone was strict? Well, if you were in a traditional school, you would hear this every single exhausting day. No talking, or read this now. Traditional teachers are way too strict. Traditional schools just have the teachers speak to their students while the students are boredly sitting. Traditional schools don't let students get their thoughts out. In traditional schools, it just is the teacher talking and instructing their students on what to do. When the teacher is not talking, students are reading from textbooks. Progressive education can help them academically and socially. National Center for Education Statistics, NCES, reports 73% of American students had better test scores than others, and they went to a progressive school. Progressive teachers, on the other hand, are nice and fun. They also let students talk to buddies. In a progressive school, the teacher briefly explains what to do, and the students collaborate to do it. They also have new tools like iPads. Progressive schools are trying to achieve the goal of having kids learn and being able to have fun and socialize. This is why there are problems for traditional schools. They are only trying to achieve students learning academically. I know that progressive schools are better than traditional schools. Traditional schools have ruled education over the years. Traditional education is education where there's nothing but the teacher talking and reading from textbooks. In Traditional Learning by Dr. Aisha Mirza and on articles, it states, in a traditional classroom setting, the students are made to sit passively while the teacher delivers a lecture. This means they're just sitting, and when the students are bored out and the teacher is just talking. This is ruining a child's education and social life. Progressive schools were founded by John Dewey, and if you are in a progressive school, it is very rare. Progressive schools just let people participate, talk, and let their ideas out. Progressive schools are characterized by what I like to call a working with model rather than a doing to model, said Alfie Kahn, an education writer from Brown University. This means that you're working with other people, not just doing this and that. Progressive education makes the student feel happy when learning. Although traditional schools still rule education, there are still some progressive schools. In Progressive versus Traditional Schools by Mimi Tamrat, teacher who studies education, Kids in the House says that half of the traditional schools are doing worse because they don't have time to socialize. This proves that progressive schools are better than traditional schools because they're socializing. This is a problem because people are doing worse in schools that have a traditional education setting, and there are more traditional schools than progressive schools. People think that traditional schools are better because they listen to the teacher speak all day, and they think that it lets the teacher's words go into their brain. And this is a problem because we can't socialize, so it won't end up to be good. It will kind of be like a sad story. We can't have parents believing in traditional schools are better because all it leads up to is bad grades and no college application. Instead of undemocratic traditionalism, however, they worry that today's public schools teach secularism, shoddy morals, evolution. This proves that there's a bad moral, a bad outcome in traditional schools, not including any democratic business or religious schools. This proves that there's a problem with traditional schools. This here is a chart, and it explains how progressive schools are doing better because in 2001, 2003, and 2001, 2002, and 2003, it's the top scores for almost everyone. And this is where progressive schools were going up and up. 2004 is kind of when traditional schools went a little higher. So this proves that the test scores in algebra is better for progressive schools. But luckily, there's a solution to this astonishing problem that traditional schools have more, or there are more traditional schools. We can check all those schools in the U.S. and turn all of them to traditional schools instead of progressive schools. It points to the need for institutional change if non-traditional students are to thrive within a system that purports to be directed towards widening open participation, said John Dewey. This proves that without any traditional schools, there will still be more participation, and which leads to better grades. Because of this, we should all be going to progressive education schools. If we use this solution, then we can change the world of education. I profoundly believe if we don't use any traditional schools in the U.S., we will be more successful in our education. Like I said, NCES reports that 73% of American students had better test scores than others, and they went to progressive schools. This is why we need to have a progressive education. Well, we need the world to progress. When we have better education, then everything will be better. We are not wide enough open. We're not opening up greatness to the world when there are progressive traditional schools. We need to be at 100% of it in education instead of 27%. My wish is to only have progressive education. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Peter? Questions?
Passionate about this topic and what gave you the idea?
I really like learning with like iPads and all that, and so I really wanted all schools to have new tools like that, and so I was looking up education, and I found that there are more traditional schools than progressive schools, and I kind of like thought that with more when there are like in traditional schools don't use iPads, so I thought that would be a good topic for me. Brandon?
Do you think our school would be a progressive school?
Our school? Yeah.
Other questions for Peter? So Peter, what were some of the other ideas? Because you had started with some other ideas, and that's how we kind of got to this idea of progressive schools. What were some of your other ideas that you wanted in the school?
Well, I also thought that we should chew gum in school because I think that helps the brain, but I decided to do it on this.
You mentioned something else to me about desks and things like that too.
All right, I think that we should have tables because it helps socialize more instead of independent desks. And also, like, there are little like holes in the desk at the top where stuff can like slide through and other people's desks.
So how do you think socializing might help you learn better at school?
Because you get to talk and like get all your ideas out, and that lets everybody like think about it and have all the ideas right. And if you might have a bad idea but you can't get it out, and so the teacher can't like help you on what to do.
Cool. Any last questions, Peter? Anything else? All right, one more final round of applause for Peter. All right, so why don't you finish your feedback for Peter? Peter, where are you sitting, bud? Back there? You can pass or funnel your feedback back to Peter so that he can get it and reflect on it.